Welcome to this Conservative Home Fringe event with the Trussell Trust on supporting people through hardship and lessons from the cost of living crisis. I'm Paul Goodman, editor of Conservative Home, and let me explain what's going to happen next. We've got an hour, 4 speakers who'll speak kind of briefly for about 3 or 4 minutes each. Then I will ask a few questions, and then it's over to you, and we will wrap up at the end of the hour. And I'm just going to introduce the speakers one at a time, and we'll take it from there. So that the very first speaker is from the Trussell Trust. It's Helen Barnard, also occasional contributor to Conservative Home. Helen.
Thank you, Paul. Lovely to see everybody. So I think for me, the starting point of our conversation today needs to be that when we look out into the communities that we work in across the UK, the cost of living crisis and hardship is getting worse at the moment, not better. So last year we saw record need for food banks across the country. We'd seen a big increase from the year before, even higher than the first year of the pandemic, and I think we thought that would be the worst. Last year was even higher, but our data this year is showing people are struggling even more. So we're seeing more people having to come to food banks, more people dragged into debt, more people who just can't keep up with the bills. We did some research with YouGov recently, looking at universal credit claimants specifically, and we found around half of people on universal credit ran out of food last month and couldn't afford to buy more. And that's true for those who are working and on universal credit as well as those who are out of work. And I think one of the really concerning things, quite apart from, in a sense, the human damage, community damage, is this is undermining the other priorities the government's got. So what we're seeing is this level of hardship is really hitting people's health. So people's mental and physical health is getting worse. So last month, 20 health bodies wrote to the Prime Minister to say so many people are having to go without essentials that this is damaging the nation's health, it's increasing strain on the NHS. And similarly, if you think about the economy, we've rightly at this conference talked a lot about how do we get more people into work, how do we get the economy firing on all cylinders again. But when people are facing this level of hardship, it really holds back all those endeavours, because if you can't pay your bills and you're skipping meals, you're not in any good position to grasp opportunities, to be able to pay the costs of going to an interview. If people can't even afford the bus fare to go to hospital appointments, and that's something that GPs are seeing, is people are not able to do the basic health that they need. All of that holds back the economy as well as increasing pressure on health services. But I think, I always start and I think it is not sunshine and roses, but I think the positive side is if we look back over the last couple of years, the government has taken some really effective action. So we saw the temporary £20 uplift in universal credit during the pandemic. We've seen the cost of living payments. We've seen household support fund investment. And all of those, you can see an immediate impact. Every time a cost of living payment goes out, we see in our data a reduction in the need for food banks. It only lasts 1 to 3 weeks though, and it goes back up. So I think the challenge for us today is to think we've tried out quite a lot of temporary solutions to this issue. We need to move on to say, what is the sustainable solution? We've got the autumn statement coming up. It's a big decision point, and I'd say there's a couple of things we can do there. One is the majority of people coming to food banks on universal credit aren't getting the full amount because money is being knocked off for debt repayments at source. That is something the Chancellor could act on this autumn to reduce those debt repayments, so more money goes in people's pockets. I think the other thing is to think about, in the long term, the underlying cause of all this is that the basic rate of benefits isn't set with reference to how much essentials actually cost, and it never has been. So every year we have the uprating debate, but we don't have that debate in the context of what's the kind of minimum people need just to get by. We need to introduce that. We need to introduce a legislation that will say, right, we're going to guarantee universal credit will always cover at least the essentials. Give people that basis. And then all the great work that the Minister is doing to help people grasp opportunities, they've got the basis to do that. I'll stop there because I know it was only 3 or 4 minutes, but happy to take questions.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. I mean, usually when I'm introducing a speaker, they've got the name of the organisation after them, or they've got the letters MP or something. But in introducing Ben Purnell, it's a slightly different experience because Ben is someone with direct experience of the issues we're talking about, and he's speaking in that context, not with the name of an organisation after him or with the letters MP. So Ben, welcome, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. MP after my name, that would be fun. Thank you for asking me to come along today. And if you said 2 years ago this is where I'd be sat, having the privilege to be able to talk about my experience and having the ability to serve others and potentially help, I wouldn't have. So I'll pinch myself and get on with it. I arrived in Warrington in November 2021. I was initially homeless after my 4th stint in a treatment centre for drug and alcohol addiction. I was moved into a housing project there for people in recovery from addiction. I used Warrington Food Bank because I needed to, not because I wanted to. I'm now stable. I've been clean and sober for 18 months. And I now have the privilege of volunteering at the same food bank and try and pay back or pay forward some of that compassion that was freely shown to me. My story is an example of one of the many reasons that people find themselves needing to use a food bank, situations that are out of their control. I encounter people on a day-to-day basis in my role there, some of whom are among the most vulnerable in our society, who are coming to us because the state is not providing for them what they need to maintain a basic level of human existence through being able to afford the basic essentials like food, utilities, or essential household goods. Around 90% of low-income households receiving universal credit, and that includes families with people working in them, are going without at least one essential like food, warm home, or toiletries. Although, as Helen has already identified, the government has taken some action towards helping this stark situation, these sticking plasters aren't really enough. All you have to do is spend a day in your local food bank and see that usage is higher than ever. In Warrington, as is common in other areas, the food bank has become entrenched within the community to a point where it has become normalised. This should never have been allowed to happen. Food banks have the aim of ending food poverty. They're not there to help cover up the cracks and smooth over the fact that a system isn't working correctly. I see the panic, fear and uncertainty in people's faces every day as they desperately want a way out but cannot find one. So many of the resources that are helping those in need have come from those who have or are experiencing poverty and hardship. Individuals coming together through adversity to show incredible resilience, creativity and ingenuity. Food banks are the tip of the iceberg of a plethora of voluntary organisations who work tirelessly day in, day out to assist members of our society when the state will not. Imagine what would be possible if this immense force for change wasn't being used to fight fires. Despite the scaling up of benefits in line with inflation, it still doesn't cover the basic essentials. This situation is further compounded in those cases where statutory deductions are imposed. Less of a little is even less. Certain provisions like the Household Support Fund provide gestural support, whilst other support initiatives such as the Local Support Scheme, which took the place of DWP crisis loans and community grants, are not freely advertised and are notoriously difficult to access. The people I meet who experience sudden life events or unexpected circumstances beyond their control are stuck in a demoralising and dehumanising cycle. Existing, and that's a word I wish to emphasise, existing, day to day, hand to mouth. Occasionally they can get an all too brief handhold that prevents them from slipping under, and hope begins to shine through. Hope that comes through connection, only to be snatched away as they, once again, an inadequate safety net that should be provided for the state falls short. Thank you for giving me the time to speak.
Thanks, Ben, very much. If you want to take any questions at the end,
More than happy.
That's fine, okay.
Yeah.
Next, someone who does have letters MP after their name, Caroline Ansell, who is an officer in the all-party group for ending the need for food banks. So, Caroline.
Thank you, Paul. And I'm privileged to represent my hometown of Eastbourne, which, in Time Out terms, this is the place to visit in 2023. Because it's a visitor destination. What that also means is that the employment landscape can look temporary, seasonal, part-time, low paid. There are some structural issues there for us to really wrestle with. It's a coastal town, so there are challenges around transport. It's a coastal town, there are challenges around recruitment. Educational outcomes are lower than in other parts of the county or country. And social housing is hugely pressured. In fact, my local council was only able to bring to the market 31 properties in the last 5 years, because one of my contentions around the way in which we can support people who find themselves in this vulnerable place or who don't have the income to meet those everyday and essential needs is around the very high cost of housing. We need so many more homes. And there are 1,000 permissions in Eastbourne for homes that haven't ever risen out of the ground. So a great deal of my work and energy and focus has been around housing. I have worked also with my local food bank, because when I stood for election, I'm a teacher by profession. When I stood for election in 2015, my mantra, if you will, was no one left behind. And I really meant it. And as a teacher, I'd seen the impacts for children who had come in hungry. Hungry children can't learn. Distressed children can't learn. But there was a really important challenge this morning at an event that looked at the Essentials challenge and looked at hunger in the UK. And the lady who spoke eloquently, like Ben, of her lived experience, described a journey to us which I think we absolutely need to have in full focus when we talk about social security. Because in her journey, she described, unwittingly perhaps, but 4 or 5 different moments in her life experience where the system could have responded in a different way, and the course of her life then would have been very different. She talked about relationship breakdown. Are we doing enough to support families? She talked about the cost of debt. We're doing enough around financial education and around debt management. My local council recently was called into question when the trigger for bailiff action was £51. And the ripple effect from that was hundreds of pounds in liabilities. She talked about anxiety and depression. We know historically we have not understood mental health or made the provision for it that it needs. She talked about having to leave employment because she hadn't got support. And in later years, we've seen the sterling work in Eastbourne of work coaches who've been better able to support and marry people up with opportunity. She talked about in her 60s being identified with autism in her 60s, hidden disabilities, another reason, underpinning all the very many opportunities where life might have played out very differently for her had the right support been in place at the right time. But I'll end on just one note, if I may. My food bank is billed as the busiest in the UK. There are pockets of deprivation in my seaside town. It doesn't mean it is the most deprived area. I like to look on it and think it's one of the most community resilient areas. It's one of the most generous areas because there is such a strong response from the local community. And when I heard the testimonies of those who'd been through their doors, they didn't speak about the food. They spoke about the compassion, and they spoke about the connection, and they spoke about relationship, and they spoke about people who were going to walk through this with them. And food, obviously, as an emergency provision, 100% required. But there was something additional and special going on there. So I do worry about the end of food banks because it's not just about the food. There is so much more to it.
Thanks very much. And finally, the Minister, Ms Davies, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you very much, Ben, for sharing your experience, and congratulations on your progress. And it's wonderful that you're with us today sharing that. Yes, there's a couple on the panel with MP after their name, but it also stands for most persistent, which I think then if you keep that and gain that title, your progress and progression will continue. So thank you so much for sharing your journey. I'm Mims Davis, I'm the Member of Parliament for Mid Sussex. I was the Employment Minister during the pandemic at DWP, and I'm currently the Minister for Social Mobility, Youth and Progression at DWP. And I've had more or less 4.5 years at DWP, the Department of Work, and I always say that, work and pensions. And the reason that also I love to highlight it because it's the Department of wonderful people who are grounded in every single community, helping in the way that the Trussell Trusters and the way that Caroline has described in her community. And in fact, I recently met the Trussell Trust in East Grinstead in my community, and one of the keen links that they wanted to draw was more engagement with the community, with the town councillors and wider to really help people. And thank you to everyone that does volunteer in the Trussell Trust and wider in terms of helping people like Ben. And I too have lived experience of being on benefits and finding tough times. And I think this is a really good reminder to all of us, whether it's health or well-being, as Caroline has said, life events, and boy, haven't we seen them with the pandemic. And particularly as Employment Minister, I worked with and interacted with people who never expected to be out of work or need support from the state. And we are here because we worry about people less fortunate than ourselves, but we also know that life events has meant that actually more people are pulled into being worried at the moment. And that anxiety and stress erodes health, as Helen has mentioned. It erodes confidence, so that the right chance and the right opportunity that you need, you might not be ready for. You might be miles away from the workforce, but we need to assist you. So that's everything that drives my job at DWP. And it's a real honour to work with so many people who are focused on making a difference in their communities. And of course, there's some big numbers here that actually, if it was all about numbers, maybe we'd be fine, because there's a total support across this year and next of £94 billion in terms of total government support to help households and individuals with the rise of cost of living. And I am very proud to be the Minister delivering the cost of living payments, the Household Support Fund, that's £1 billion extra to help people. It is all there, and one of the key bits, and as Ben has so eloquently described, when things are really tough, where on earth do you go? Actually, where do you find these big numbers and these, pockets of cash to help you? So one of the key things that I did during the pandemic was help create the Job Help website. That's a starting point for people. There's also a benefits calculator on .gov.uk and the Help for Households support as well. So if you're ever talking, if you're a counsellor, if you're engaged in anything in terms of helping people who need support, please direct them there. Make sure through the Help to Claim service and the assistance that DWP gives alongside charity support with Citizens Advice, that we are directing people to the help that is there. There are hardship funds, and there's more out there quite often than you realise. And in fact, during the pandemic, for under 25s, most at risk of long-term unemployment, we have built through DWP a network of around 140 youth hubs. Now, we talk about clubs and family hubs and all sorts of things like this, but this is exactly as Caroline described, for somebody who is in real peril and really worried. You could be sofa surfing, you could be impacted domestic abuse, there could be substance abuse, there could be challenges going on where you can go and find that partnership work and that support in your community. So please talk to your job centre and your team there. And they are deliberately in places that work for the community. Some are in football clubs, rugby clubs, they're in libraries, they're in wherever is right for the local community. And there's no big arrow over anybody's head when you walk in that you're going in for any kind of assistance and help. I'm sure we're going to talk about what we can do and what we've learned from the need to help people through the cost of living crisis and the impacts of the pandemic and the wider global issues. But I think what I've learned and I've been putting in practice is more cross-government work that puts the claimant, the individual, the young person, whoever is in need, at the heart of policy making, that it's agile, that it works for changes of circumstances, and that it's not just, it sounds good from Whitehall. So I think that's really, really key, that it works for every community and every circumstance. We've got covenants on social mobility, on homelessness, because this is a whole system approach, making sure that we work with employers. If we could create 300,000 jobs through the Kickstart scheme, why on earth can't we continue to create those starting opportunities for young people going forward? So I'm sure there's more that other people want to say and hear from, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a pattern of what we've been working on at DWP. Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much. Okay, so we'll start the discussion, and I want to begin with I think it's a relatively simple question, which follows on from what the Minister was saying. So you described spending of an enormous amount of money. It's probably about a tenth of public spending.
And that's without housing, Paul, which is 30 billion a year, over 1% of GDP.
Then you also described a vast array of responses, an enormous number of organisations and bodies delivering it. So the question I want to ask you is, which of those interventions by central government, local government, anyone else, which of them are the most effective in helping to lift people out of hardship? And if you don't mind, I'd just start with, turning to Ben, just asking you what was most helpful to you out of all the, or any of the help provided, if anything.
Yeah, sure. So, having people who have lived experience, people who I could relate to, who I could see myself in, definitely. Compassion, things that were, that they were personable. They weren't abstract systems. They were people on the ground who could kind of hold me and help me through at my most vulnerable point. Community-based organisations that I've been able to engage with and grow within. So, yeah.
Are you thinking of any in particular? I'm trying to sort of drill down to kind of what they look like.
Yeah, okay, sure. So I'm like where I live at the moment, it's a recovery project. So the model there is that I'm drug and alcohol screens. We have certain conditions of residency, so we engage with mutual support, with training, with voluntary work. And through that helped me that was a stable base from which I could then start branching back out into the community. And all of this is centred around connection and developing and nourishing those connections. So through that kind of hub, if you like, for my recovery, I've engaged with the food bank, with Trussell, with, fellowship, shall we say, for substance abuse, and that's helped me to grow.
Helen, what's your reaction to that? Because that's an answer that's not just about resources; it's about human contact and human relationships and human support.
Yeah. Well, I think tackling the issue we're talking about, hardship, it isn't down to any one actor in society. It's not just government's job. And it's not just a community's job. What you need is communities helping each other, which we've seen, voluntary and community groups that Ben's talking about. Business and employers can and do an immense amount in this. What I think we're seeing, though, is there are certain basics that we need the government to have in place to allow all those other actors to do their thing. And at the moment, that kind of very basic system, universal credit, which was obviously developed, implemented by a Conservative-led government, it performed incredibly well during the pandemic, during that, red-hot heat of that. What we're finding now, though, is that because the level has gone so low, so if you take the community groups Ben works with, they are doing that human connection that we all need. But I think what a lot of them would say is, if you've got somebody who we've already helped them claim all the benefits that they can get, we've already helped them deal with their debt, they still can't afford enough food and to keep the lights on, actually that kind of kicks the legs out from what the community groups are doing. Whereas if we can get that basic system in place and doing, just covering the essentials, that's the key, all the others can flourish. and the individuals can flourish in their communities.
Could I just make a point actually, just on that? My situation does afford me the ability to be able to engage with those organisations effectively because I'm single, I live in shared accommodation. You know, my lifestyle affords me the ability to go to other affordable food initiatives. It's not the case for everybody who I encounter. You know, not everybody has that lifestyle. You know, think of families, for example, who I meet day to day at the food bank. They don't have the ability that I do. They have much higher costs of living. You know, my costs of living, you know, aren't massively high compared to some others who struggle to maintain that baseline, and that's, like I say, only because of my unique circumstance.
I've got a question about that in a sec, but just is there any further response to what Ben? All right.
In terms of the most successful intervention,
Yes,
I think is
yes,
where we
yes,
started.
that's where we started.
I guess I would just relay my experience down at the job centre, which in my mind's eye from former days was the place where you had little jobs on tickets on sort of walls and in pink and yellow, how wholly transformed it actually is. And I sat alongside one of the work coaches, and one of their flock came in and said, "I'm not coming to my appointment this afternoon. I have a job."
Yeah.
And the joy that there was, I mean, bells started ringing because there was the relationship and connection. And actually meeting with that lady weeks later down the road, she didn't just talk about the hike in her income, she walked taller. It was powerfully good for her confidence, her mental health, her feeling of being part of something. And actually she told me that she was now volunteering at the food bank and she was contributing. What a powerful thing it is to be connected to that world of work. And so all the efforts to keep people in their employment, if they have that shock diagnosis, or if just some reasonable adjustments can be made to keep them in place, that's what I've seen as most impactful. And my food bank, as well as providing food parcels in terms of their impact, in 1 year connected people who'd come through their doors with £1 million of government support that they had not been in receipt of, money that they were entitled to, that was provided for them, £1 million. So there's a bit of an issue there around data and around comms. But that was another really impactful part of their work, to connect people with the support that was there. And we saw that very much in pension credit, which is like a gateway benefit. And we really had a huge drive to encourage people to find out if they were entitled. And of course they said, "Oh, I'm entitled to £1.50 of pension credit," which at face value doesn't seem very worthwhile, but it opens the door to so many other avenues of support. And in Eastbourne, that push around connecting people with the support to which they were already entitled has been hugely impactful.
Well, absolutely agree with that, and I thank goodness for the work on the pension credit as a gateway, and I think this links to what's been the most effective. So, universal credit stood up absolutely, and Therese Coffey, our Secretary of State at the time, equated it to the kind of Wallace and Gromit, where you're building the track and everything is still coming at you. And was the computer system and the pivot that we had at DWP going to stand up to it? And all power to our civil servants, where we hauled every laptop we could find at anybody. We retrained, we pivoted people into helping people. And I think it was something like 27,000 hours additional was done over the Easter, and I hope I've got that figure right because I'm drawing it somewhere from the back of the brain, was worked by DWP employees on who just ploughed into doing universal credit over that bank holiday weekend in Easter when it all kicked off, when everybody came towards us. And can you imagine everybody queuing around the block at their Job Centre Plus, which is the place that I call Jobs Community Progression, because it's not just about getting a job, and it is not cards on the wall and bars on the windows, and we've made it very, very different for the experience for people to come there. So not only it's about getting what you're entitled to, it's about progressing, earning more, and making sure that you get the skills and the abilities that you deserve and need. So for example, we've got Google certificates, 9,000 Google certificates you can do over a two-year period around what you're doing, which will give you a level 3 qualification. And in Toxteth Job Centre, when I with the people from Google met the young chap who was going to do the first certificate, was life-changing. Number one, because people actually work at Google, and that was quite a surprise. We thought it was just this thing on the screen. And the other side of this is the Household Support Fund. So we've been able to pivot and change, and it's there for a year for our local councils. And what we've been able to do in that process, and I've been doing regular engagement around table with our local authority about what works, the local authorities all up and down the land, what works, how do we best long-term help this fund to be most effective, also for those people that Caroline describes maybe just above the benefit threshold. You'll know many of the people coming into needing the support are working all the hours God sends, but it's the making the ends meet bit that's not working. So we've been able to stretch and pivot the policy to work for those people, and include in that financial inclusion and other support for them, so that actually we're not building in people who need to keep coming back and any kind of entitlement. We're building in positivity and that springboard that Caroline talked about into making work pay or being able to earn more. And we know that a job is so much more than a pay packet. It's the network, the confidence, the well-being that comes of being part of something, and that if you're able to progress from the point that you're so far away from the labour market to get to that point and then to see the future, the confidence that brings. And if I had a penny that I could give back to DWP over the last 4.5 years of being a minister there for the word confidence, I would be incredibly well off, and even more people would be.
Thanks, Minister. I have two more questions before I let everyone else in. The first one is about something that sounds rather abstract, but I think is quite real, which is all about pooling income. So, I mean, Ben, you said a moment ago that at the food bank, we're very conscious that people come in with families with high costs. Families are also able to kind of share income if they have income. And having two incomes to share wherever the money comes from is better than one. And there may be kind of indirect benefits to being in a household with other people. So, Caroline, you talk about getting information about help that's available. If you're on your own, you may not know. If you're with someone else, it's just a chance that other person will know where to go. My question is all about what government can do to ensure that it's easier for people to kind of pool their income, whether that's in terms of quite simple things like being able to find a home. Not particularly easy at the moment, whether you're renting, let alone buying, which is rather beyond most of the people we're talking about here. What can government do to use mechanisms like institutions like families, which are a natural income sharing mechanism, or even getting business to chip in? So who wants to start? Yeah. Helen, yeah.
I think it's a really interesting approach, I think both for the role of business and government and family. So I think you're right to pinpoint housing. I think that's something that it's been a big theme, and we know that one of the things that's holding people back from forming their own families now is not being able to find somewhere to go and make a family home. And so that is partly about supply, building more houses, and building more affordable houses. But there's also, within the DWP's grasp, we've got local housing allowance, which is what helps you with your rent if you're in the private rented sector. That was frozen back in 2020. Since then, rents have shot up. So now, local housing allowance should cover the cheapest 30% of rents in your area. That's the idea. IFS has found, Institute for Fiscal Study has found it only covers 5% now. So that kind of key thing that lets you manage your rent and have a secure home, that has been, that link has been broken. So I think that's one thing. I think in terms of businesses, one of the interesting things has been things like businesses that have started to bolt on savings products to their auto-enrolment of pensions. And that's something which is helping kind of employees, particularly low-paid employees, start saving a bit. And that's been really positive. The last thing I would say is there is a real issue around social and digital isolation. So we found with the research we've done that an enormous proportion of people coming to food banks have become really severely socially isolated. And partly because they can't afford, to get a bus to see someone, partly because there's a real shame involved. People feel deeply ashamed that they aren't able to afford things. And that compounds it, cuts you off from those networks, doesn't it? Cuts you off from hearing about things. So actually getting some of those things right and making sure people have digital connectivity. So again, lots of people don't have internet at home. So, try looking for a job or keeping in touch with family or doing your journal with DWP. It's a nightmare if you don't have your own internet. All those things are kind of enablers.
Well, we have social tariffs, and if we're talking about employers and how people can help, please let's get more of those. And please, if you are struggling, talk to your provider. Do you have a social tariff? And they are out there. We have done some promotion on this. We're about to do some more. Been doing some work with Paul Scully and John Whittingdale on that. I completely agree about that in terms of recruitment. And again, that's study and learning and inclusion, particularly around perhaps working where actually flexible, hybrid, home working, battling through what we've done with presenteeism is stopped if you can't get online and you can't apply online. And this again is a plea to employers. Stop recruiting in your own image, looking for the finished article. Stop making it so difficult for people to apply. What we did with Kickstart is we got people interviewing people in the job centre, meeting people, seeing the talent and the abilities, giving a chance to people, and took the tech out of it, and that made a massive big difference. Look, I'm going to make an audacious bid to the Chancellor, because everyone else is. I would love to have more money for LHA, and I'm asking because benefits adequacy, if you're going to talk about that, is only makes sense if you fix the housing, because everything just goes down the back of the sofa in terms of literally where your money goes. And actually what we want as Conservatives, and those are in the room who are Conservatives, not sure everyone is, because I see some people from different organisations and groups, and lovely people that I know as well from those groups, so good to see you all here today. If we don't fix that and we get more and more people into the housing support need hopper, then ultimately it creates the challenges that we've got there. And it's not just about building houses, it's about step-on accommodation and shared accommodation where you've got that support network that you need. There's some work that I'm really trying to do to make sure that if you have a different type of housing setup, that it's easier for you to progress and earn more money. There's not a disincentive to work, and I'm very much focused on this. So I think it was just to fix this and the lessons learned, to go back to the question, let's be forensic where the policy goes wrong and things don't work, and that's what I'm absolutely spending my time on. And if we can get rent to buy to actually turn into home ownership, that would be incredibly helpful as well. I think pooling income is the only reason that I am sitting here today, because my dad was attacked at work when I was 11. We went to living on benefits, we lost our home, and we pooled our income to get me to university and to support my family. And I would have gone to a food bank if they'd existed at that point. So I count myself extremely lucky that that's how we managed to progress, and it, had that life-changing impact. So I think that lived experience, both in policy making, in sharing it, and making sure that government understands that in local and national levels, and being forensic about what's holding people back, or more importantly right now, pulling people in, is the biggest lesson from the cost of living crisis.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, only to really reaffirm that point around housing and the cost of housing as being one of the drivers here around that essentials question. In Eastbourne today, there are 28 one-bedroom flats currently available for rent. The cheapest is £700 per calendar month.
Okay. Anything else? No. Actually, I'm going to go over to everyone else. I'll save my last question to the end. Let some people get in.
Teasing us.
It's not a long question. I'd take the lady near the back and the lady there. Yeah.
Thank you. My name's Morgan Vine. I work for the National Older People's Charity Independent Age, and we support older people on low income. And it's been great to hear everything you've spoken about, including pension credit, which we know really helps people. I was interested in the social tariff point. Often older people on low income are really left out of that conversation, and we've been having new research that we've done talking to older people, like about 700 older people on low income, who have said they had no idea social tariffs exist. Yeah. And I think it needs to be cross-utility, because we're hearing from people, and Helen mentioned this around digital exclusion, lots of people who have the capability and capacity to be online, and the first thing they're cutting is their broadband because they can't afford it. So I'm interested in the Minister's view, and Caroline's as well, on whether the government could do something higher up to sort of support companies to do this. Brilliant if utility companies do it directly, and I know some do already, but what can the government do to step in and make that a bit more consistent?
Okay, next. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm from, my name is Jamila, I'm from MENCAP. I want to say thank you for, I just want to welcome the government for scrapping the work capability assessment. But in place of that, what we're seeing is there's going to be job coaches who don't necessarily know much about people with learning disabilities and the tailored support that they could receive, which would be helpful towards them in making claimant commitments, and instead we're seeing sanctions. What do you think should be done so that people with learning disabilities can move into work without worrying about losing their benefits through sanctions? Thank you.
Right. Who wants to start?
Well, I've got a feeling that one's certainly for me. Look, I've been working very closely with Tom Pursglove in terms of, how we make sure that our employment is inclusive, and that, and what I would say is quite often a lot of employers talk about being inclusive employers and then regress because they get worried about doing it well, and actually it then goes completely backwards. What we found with the Kickstart programme, 7 out of 10 young people went into long-term jobs, and the other sort of feedback is some of them went into further education. I can see Lenny of the University of Sussex here, so you'll be pleased to see that they went on to the degrees and other learnings that they wanted. And actually many of those young people we found had hidden disabilities, undiagnosed disabilities, etc. So it's not surprising. Caroline talked about a 60-year-old lady finding things out. Lots of women actually go undiagnosed. So I think it is about embracing, again, what the question is, what we've learnt from the cost of living crisis, how recruitment and proper inclusive employment can be. And I think what we want to do, and it's right to do, is build a system where you're not penalised for doing more and you're not in a jeopardy of trying something, and that we do have a system that works with fluctuating health conditions and well-being. And actually, as we find more disabilities, more challenges, we've got to have a workforce and a workplace and an employment system that works for those people. So I hope that gives you real understanding, because I know there's worry about this. My dad never really properly worked again because of his head injury, and actually thinking about what he could have done instead of having to be always at his worst, and that worries me, because actually we know how much better it is for you, and volunteering also has a huge value as well. On the social tariffs point and the older people, it's really important we get older people online interacting and engaging. I know I get a message from my friend when her husband, who's got dementia in the care home, does her a video when there's COVID going on, and they're able to share that moment, and that she knows he's all right, and that's wonderful for them. But the best quality deals and opportunities are very often online. So older people who have less money around and are not able to change their income are impacted by that. And, you know, it shouldn't be that you've just got to ask the right question. I do think the sector are really coming to the table, and we just need to really encourage them. And I keep you to carry on holding them to account. And I think we can make sure that older people aren't left out of this conversation. And just quickly on the auto-enrolment and the jam jar savings and everything that comes with it. Recent was an NCS year of service event, and I met a young girl who'd asked me a question a year before, what can I do and what should I do and what's your biggest regret in life? And I said, not starting a pension sooner, because I work self-employed. I'm now single mum in an insecure career. Damn, I should have done that pension. Anyway, she came to me a year later and said, I've started my pension and I'm delighted. Now we've got automatic enrolment. I would say to younger people and anybody listening, the best thing we can do is work with employers to make sure that that is embedded from that age, and that will also help us to have the retirement in the future that we all want to.
Anyone else on the social tariff? No?
I was just going to jump in on the
Yep.
digital divide,
Yep.
because one other dynamic about Eastbourne, the Daily Mail likes to call it the oldest place in the world, but there is just one part of the constituency where the average age is over 70. It's true. Why would you not want to retire in Eastbourne? So clearly, we have quite a significant number of people in those later years. So the digital divide has been something, frankly, in the pandemic, it terrified me. The difference between those who are online and could access services and support and have that window on the world and connect with family and friends, and those who weren't. And speaking to some, it was the divide is so great that they'll say, no, it's not for me. And you think, without understanding the differences in what opportunities lie there. But we've had a really strong sort of social action outreach where there's been a wave of IT equipment sort of surrendered, if you like, given in and repurposed and redistributed, and young people coming forward to sit alongside and to mentor. So we're seeing some real gains in that regard. But alongside, I'm still campaigning to keep cash and to keep face-to-face appointments as well, because not everybody can make that digital leap. That's the truth of it. But around the digital challenge, one of the things that I've seen really effectively done is to provide training for those on return ships, essentially, those coming back into the workforce, 50s and 60s. They're not digital natives, and actually the world has made this quantum leap without them. And so there's been a deal of kind of recapture in terms of those skills that are now just common currency, but not in those later years.
Can I come in on the disability point? So it's worth saying that the majority of people who get referred to our food banks are disabled or live with someone who is, but the majority are disabled themselves. And probably one of the biggest things that people face is getting access to disability benefits feels incredibly difficult, incredibly traumatic for some people. It's a very, very frightening experience. You know, people will still talk about getting an envelope through the door for a reassessment. And there was one gentleman one of our food banks supported who had a real mental health crisis at that point and came very close to things going very, very wrong. So actually reforming the process you have to go through to make it faster and more human is really crucial. So, you know, getting rid of WCA, I suspect, is probably a good thing. But if that means everything's going through personal independence payments, we've got to reform those, because the top benefit issue that we support people with, that Citizens Advice support people with, is trying to get access to PIP. And at the moment, that system isn't fit for purpose. And so we need to use this time to reform it.
And the high level of successful appeals.
It shows something is going wrong, isn't it? If we,
There are some issues there.
So, light in the tunnel, just because I know one of the people want to come in. We've managed to, as Caroline's described, totally change that experience of coming to a job centre and take away the stigma and take away the negativity of engaging with us. And that is at the heart of what's just been described there. So that the experience of however you're engaging with the DWP is a positive, a supported, a tailored experience. And that's at the heart of this. So please, people, do not worry, because we need to react to what's been totally rightly described, but make sure that everybody's included in those changed experiences.
So two more. Gentleman there. And I know, we're and the guy right at the end there. Yeah.
Thank you so much. My name is Reverend Graham Hunter, representing Citizens UK here. It sounds to me as though when we're talking about the lessons learned, pounds and people both come into play. And on the subject of pounds, the Chancellor announced yesterday an uplift to the national living wage. Citizens UK, of course, is the home of the real living wage, which is around 10% higher, but significantly as well, the real living wage applies to all people in employment, not just the over 25s, some of the exclusions that are there. And I wonder whether there's something to be considered, whether the Minister would consider an offer to young people in particular around increasing, in supporting them with wages. And then on the subject of people, Helen and Ben both spoke about the importance of the people on the front line doing the delivery. Caroline did as well about these things. As somebody who works in that sector and has had to close a debt centre and has had to close a youth project because we just can't get funding to keep on going, we need to find ways to support the third sector better and just get cash into those places in local communities where people are running the food banks, running the debt centres and doing that support. So I'd love to hear what plans the Minister has for that.
Yep. Yes, it'll only be a couple of seconds. Yeah, I can hear you.
Hello, my name is Jem Maben. I'm from Utilita Energy, which Mim should know because it's your old constituency, I believe. Our research and research from the University of Oxford shows that 10 million homes are going to be fuel poor this winter. Obviously, there was EBS payments last year and various things in place. There's none of that this winter. We have found an affordability gap of at least £600 per household. That's a third of all households in Britain. We're going to have to plug a £600 gap just to stay warm this winter. Should the government be intervening here and filling that financial gap this winter?
Okay, right. Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll answer really quickly, and God love you, lovely utility people. But yeah, this is an audacious bid for me to say, what are you doing on a social tariff in the meantime? So let's make sure this is a real partnership. But I think in regard to the gap and the support, that's where the Household Support Fund and other hardship support funds are there. Please do look at benefits calculator on .gov.uk. Look at the help per household. It is also down in the devolved spaces as well. So there is assistance there. But I think, again, it's just making sure that we have got the tools out there for people who might not normally be in that scenario to get the extra help that they need. And also that's why the progression piece and the work that we're doing at DWP to help people earn more and take more home and have less of a gap is really important. And that flows into the point about the national living wage. Look, I made an audacious bid back in the chamber a long time ago when Sadge was Chancellor and said, under 25s, let's do more. So my focus is youth. I'm never going to argue that point. So I'd always like to see us doing as much as we can for young people. And that's why being forensic, again, about where housing policy or benefits policy, and as ably described by Ben, where different groups of people, it actually works for everybody. And that's what I try really hard to delve down in. I think we've got a lovely, important slogan for the conference about, long-term decision making and doing the right thing. And I think that's important because we've been buffeted by the impact of what's happened over the last few years. But what I think we all do, and I was the Charities Minister for some time, we'd love to just stop this bidding for the next shiny thing. Why are we still doing that? Let's not bid for the next shiny thing. Let's make sure that we're pooling government resources and working together to make sure that we can keep long-term support, that we know that's right, and that we focus on outcomes of our spending and outcomes that people need, and that we keep funding that. And I think that's the way to make your life and everyone's life easier.
Not if there are lots more questions. Have we only got 5 minutes?
We have only got 5 minutes, right? Helen, anything, or can we
The only thing I would say is on Household Support Fund, I absolutely agree it can be great. Can we have a multi-year settlement rather than every year having to kind of bid for
You want me to do another audacious bid to the Chancellor,
I would.
which I'm very happy
Yes,
to do. It's
carried.
running till next year, the first time that it's gone beyond 6 months, so it's a year, but I will be officially lobbied by this meeting and I'll be making more audacious bids, but of course.
I'd only add about community energy schemes.
Yes, come and
and,
utility, we'll have a quick meeting after.
Rooftop solar.
We're down to one more, I'm afraid, so it's going to be you, sir.
I've got an unaudacious bid to the Chancellor. I want to raise the issue of Healthy Start, which is a scheme that already exists. Incredibly modest to give low-income families vouchers to be used for fruit and veg. But so many people don't know that this scheme exists. I meet with MPs who don't know that the scheme exists. There's only a 60% take-up rate, I think, in England. So basically, what can be done about this? The Department of Health says that they can't even contact people to let them know that they're eligible because the data is held by the DWP, and that uses a different computer system. Sorry, I'm from the Food Foundation, and we talk to both departments a lot and aren't getting anywhere with the civil servants. So as a DWP minister, is there anything that you can do to just get this moving?
Excellent lobbying, very well done. Actually, again, going to the question about the lessons, actually our data sharing with local authorities because of the Household Support Fund, cross-government data sharing, it's crazy that our supermarkets and who we like to shop, if we have got online abilities, they know everything about us, share it incessantly, it feels, and actually it's okay if you're getting something out of it, but if it's for government that we're very frightened about it, or health, etc. So I think we've got a slightly topsy-turvy relationship with data sharing, and actually hopefully we're going to refine that. I do know about that programme, which would be very pleased to know. It should be on the Help for Households website, so come back to me if it's not there. But again, that makes me sound like a really stuck record about this is a repository for all the support that's out there, and that's where things like the Youth Hub, some of the engagement, the Trussell Trust, and some of the trusted relationship conversations, which actually if you said, oh hello, this is the government calling, we're just here to help you, they wouldn't necessarily be wanting to listen. So we need that whole system approach, and yourselves are really important to that.
Can I suggest that rather than having an additional scheme, can we just put this help through the child element of universal credit, so you only have to apply once and then you get the help that's out there, rather than having to apply for a separate scheme for fruit and veg to the scheme that's helping you buy bread? Just a thought.
Look, I can't make any audacious bids on UC because I'm not the minister for it, but I'm sure someone will be recording this. Oh, you are, and it will get to go up on them.
And there's a
thank
similar
you.
dynamic too around free school meals, where children aren't getting the sort of support they might because of the data barrier.
We are recording this, so the Chancellor will get all these audacious bits
Oh, gosh,
that have been flowing in
I'm
the
going to
last
send
hour.
him a text saying sorry. Sorry, but I still mean it.
Maybe not. Just final quick closing question. Just Helen, how important do you feel this agenda is to the government?
I mean, for me, it's got to be, surely it's the top issue facing the country if we've got 1 in 7 people struggling to afford food and facing hunger. It seems to me you can't go into an election with a pitch that doesn't include a serious plan to say, you know, the British public believe in this, the polling is just ridiculous on this, the level of support the public have for saying this is unacceptable, we want our political leaders to sort this out, and the support for making social security adequate to cover essentials. So for me, I think it's hard to be a credible future or current government if you haven't got a plan to deal with the most extreme hardship across the country.
Caroline, the Minister, and then Ben, last words. So, Caroline?
Yes.
Yes. Minister.
Well, I hope that I've shown you cross-government and with the work that I'm doing, whatever shape, family, scenario or is happening in your life or the people that you're representing or worrying about, that there is a serious focus on it. I will continue to put that across. And I do agree, in the polling it's very, very clear that cost of living is a massive concern for people, and that's why we're here today. So thank you for this. It's going to be a whole system approach. It is going to be a partnership. Yes, it's great that it's going to be in somebody's manifesto somewhere, but the reality is it's the here and now. It's extremely acute, and whatever those barriers are, that we at DWP and across government are here and determined to try and do more for you and continue to learn the lessons and deliver the change and outcomes for people.
And any last words or
Yeah,
thoughts?
yeah. Once again, thank you for the privilege being here. For me, it has to be bottom up. You know, I think I wouldn't feel as though I was doing myself credit or the organisation I'm here representing if I wasn't to say, you know, the reforms that you've stated, you know, about, you know, access to work and, you know, claiming benefits. You know, if that's not the reality to people on the ground. You know, people are still struggling to access these services. They're still finding that, you know, they're getting punitive measures levied against them when they're trying to access these things. I have friends who have tried to access these services. It was mentioned, you know, they have mental health issues, and, you know, you can see the impact on these people day in, day out. You know, it's not theoretical, it's real. You know, so you need to listen to the people who are going through these things. And you have to guarantee that baseline for living as well. It's almost as though if you can't get your head out from under that, nothing else is possible. It has to be guaranteed.
Okay, so Ben, Mims, Helen and Karen, thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.